Attack on Titan's story just changed direction in a very drastic way. From this point on, in the words of his father Grisha, everything will go Eren's way. With Attack on Titan Season 4 Part 2 Episode 4, Memories of the Future, it is revealed that the current situation as we know it has all been masterminded by Eren Yeager. Not only that, but the position of power Zeke had been speaking from, like a rug, was pulled from underneath him. It'll be Eren's plan that wins out, and it is up to Zeke to try and stop him. In the previous episode, the two brothers met at the Nexus coordinate known as the Paths, where Zeke revealed himself to be in fact the one with the Founder's powers, not Eren. At least in regards to utilizing them. However, with Zeke refusing to abandon this little brother of his he believed to be brainwashed by their father, just as he was in his youth, for the sake of saving him, Zeke would take Eren on a journey through time, beginning with Eren's infancy as his father held him. Here, Grisha looked happy, which seemed to perturb Zeke. The Marleyan people have for hundreds of years regarded Eldians to be of devilish origins and disposition, and although Zeke's ideology doesn't exactly align with theirs, the connotation of negativity is virtually the same, and with that, Grisha is a devil among devils to him. And knowing of all his sins and the many lies he'd previously forsaken, including those of his own family, Zeke, of course, scorned the father he perceived to be a masquerading villain of no conscience. But Zeke had already made his mind up about his father long ago. At this point, his objective was to show Eren how their father brainwashed and planted the seeds of nationalism in him, wholeheartedly believing their father must have caused Eren to be the way he is now, rendering him incapable of accepting his sterilization plan. But it's by way of these past events that it becomes clearer than ever that Zeke is really bitter about his father's earlier actions that destroyed their family. These earliest memories aren't all too telling, however, Zeke does take any and every opportunity to point out the faults of his father. Now, it's important to recognize that with the coordinate being a place where time defies its natural course, although we only see so many scenes, these two are in fact spending several years with one another as they scrub through all these events on an even day-to-day basis, as Zeke is ever insistent on proving his point to Eren and extending his salvation to him. Eventually, we have their father using his medical occupation to get close to those in power, doing so for the sake of hunting down the king and stealing the power of the founding Titan. And if you recall, Grisha over time does in fact become a rather reputable doctor, as he actually managed to save the community from a plague. With the stagnation and rejection of technological advancement within the walls, Grisha, as an outsider, possessed medical knowledge and expertise others in his field lacked. So it wasn't just that he was a chatty doctor, he was a cut above the rest, and of course people in positions of power tend to want the best help possible. Now with this behavior, Zeke would bring up the fact that if their father had ever slipped up or gotten caught, he and everyone else of significance in his life would have been dragged through hell right along with him, the very blow that struck his previous family and ruined them. Up to this point, Eren was very neutral, but here he sides with Zeke and echoes the sentiment that their father would toss aside family for his goals. Eren then, with a serious expression, would tell Zeke that he was wrong, shouldn't have been born, and that their father's brainwashing was no longer controlling him. Eren was just telling Zeke what he wanted to hear, but Zeke wasn't about to rush things. They had plenty of time to further solidify such a stance after all. They would from there just continue through Eren's life with their father, and it was pretty cool to see Hannes again. Here he was a bit younger with his hair being a bit longer. A nice little reminder of simpler times, back when there was a relative peace within the walls. On top of that, we would see Kenny through these flashbacks as well. But from there, to the surprise of both Eren and Zeke, it is revealed that Grisha found the King of the Wall's hideout long ago, several years prior to the point that they were both expecting. The look on Grisha's face as he confirmed the location and his demeanor as he left said it all. There seemed to be hesitation and anxiousness as he second-guessed himself. When Grisha returned home that day, he held onto his toddler Eren ever so closely as he was overwhelmed by emotions with tears in his eyes. And to this, Zeke was stunned. This was a stark contrast to the cold and demanding father he remembered. All the while, Eren looked at his brother Zeke as he took the scene in. Eventually, Zeke would come to the rationalization that Grisha simply loved his second son enough to delay his restorationist goals. as with such a conclusion, he was able to somewhat shield himself, still considering his father to be a monster, albeit one that perhaps did possess some semblance of sentimentality. Had Grisha gone through with it then and there, Eren's life would have been greatly affected. Zeke now figured that Grisha must have learned something from his past fatherly failings. This didn't excuse nor negate his prior faults, but naturally, it only made sense for a man to correct such compromising behavior. And truly with all of this, it would seem that their journey through time has been more for Zeke's sake than Eren's. One last confirmation of his charted course and all the years he had spent juxtaposed to his father's perceived to be heinous ideology. While Zeke believed all this to be for Eren, it was he who was having his thoughts affected by seeing these things. It was he who was truly learning. So then you have to wonder if it was Zeke's own curiosity why he continued showing all this to Eren. That's not to say that his plan of saving Eren changed, but subconsciously he was curious to see it all for himself as well, especially considering how many surprises there were to be found. During this point, Eren would notice his father resting with a picture of Zeke and his first wife at his side. Quickly after, as he laid resting, both would hear Grisha muttering an apology to Zeke. This shocked the two of them, but it quickly got weirder as he would look in the direction of Zeke and ask if it was really him. Grisha would then assume he was being a bit crazy here because Zeke couldn't possibly be an old bearded man. This timeline Zeke was, after all, still very young. Zeke would begin to try and process the strange phenomenon that just occurred, but Eren would not give him any time to, as he was ready to move on to the next scene. Now this is really telling. Eren has at this point shifted to a seat of dominance. It would seem that it is now his choice to continue. No longer is he bound to the whim of Zeke's decree of advancement. This was actually a very big scene. It, one, showed that they could interact with the past, at least partially, and two, again, it seemed the focus was on Zeke. In a lot of scenes here, Eren is hardly visible. He is more so in the shadows, while Zeke is in the little light available. By the time they had observed the first 9 years of Eren's life, Zeke had now seen enough to recognize that in fact, Grisha loved Eren and allowed him to grow freely. Up until then, Zeke assumed that Grisha had put Eren through a similar sort of torturous brainwashing to his own, but now there was a newfound confusion. If Eren was never brainwashed, why did he betray Zeke? Grisha had told Eren nothing and simply made him inherit a Titan, yet Eren here is following Grisha's ideals. Upon being questioned, Eren would simply say that he is who he has always been from the moment he was born. As we would then move on to the point in time in which Eren protects Mikasa and murders several men. He'd say to Zeke that the two were not the same. Rather than letting someone steal his freedom, Eren would steal theirs first. And how appropriate is it that the flashback would use a bird, the perfect symbol of freedom, to transition here. Grisha didn't make Eren like this. In fact, the disbelief of Eren's actions in this instance was written not only on the face of Grisha, but Zeke as well. All this would be explained when Eren as a child justified killing a man to protect Mikasa. Our adult Eren would continue, explaining to Zeke that he won't find Eren to be a convenient little brother to share emotional scars with. Eren makes it clear here that he sees Zeke as a man who cannot accept himself until he denies his father's wish to restore Eldia. Basically saying that Zeke is letting his trauma and animosity towards his father lead him, as opposed to any sort of respectable reasoning. In the eyes of Eren, Zeke is just a man haunted by his dead father. He is not free, he is shackled. However, Zeke would express that he was fine with this because it was what happened during his childhood that opened his eyes to what is right, saving the world from the threat of Eldia. What is essentially the conveyance that despite being a wretched father, it is due to Grisha's actions that this future Zeke yearns for will come to fruition, which Zeke himself would consider to be ironic, but oh my goodness, he has no idea what the true irony here is. But besides this, I think it is important to consider the words shared here between a young Eren and Grisha. When Grisha questions if Eren understands what he has done, Eren equates the people that he has killed to being nothing more than dangerous animals that just so happened to look like people. And this is a dangerous sentiment to possess, especially for a child. For Eren, those who oppose him, more specifically those content to be bound and caged, are animals, and he holds no regard for such worthless lives. As Grisha would then point out Eren's willingness to so easily throw away his own life. Now before the two depart from this point in time, Eren simply observes his exchange with Mikasa when he had given her the red scarf. He's not very expressive, but his attention is certainly worth noting. Later, Zeke would remind Eren that he will not abandon him, straight up saying here that he could fulfill his plan at any time, a reminder to Eren and us as the audience. And in this scene, we see Grisha tending to children, which is important when we consider what he will do to the children of the Race family. Next, the two brothers would observe the notion of Grisha's final words in his journal: "Humanity has not perished." And as he touched the photo of his first family and closed the book, we could see some regret and confliction. In the end though, the book was locked away. And now with the key in hand, Grisha, unbeknownst to Zeke, locks eyes with Eren, pausing for a moment before we proceed to the following scene. With that, we are now at the point of the very first episode of Attack on Titan, one that we may now see from a different perspective. It was a normal day, except Eren's father was leaving for work. Present Eren will watch on observantly, while Zeke looked confused at the household on this day. Mikasa had just revealed Eren's intentions to join the Survey Corps, a known to be life-risking aspiration that had claimed the lives of so many, a revelation that even Zeke seemed to be taken aback by. Their father, however, would not deter his son from such desires. Instead, he asked why Eren wanted to go outside the walls. It was as if he knew what Eren specifically was interested in. Grisha was right though, Eren wanted to know what the outside world was like. He didn't want to live inside, ignorant for all of his life. Then adding that otherwise, those who had lost their lives out there, their deaths would have all been for nothing. Now this part would affect Grisha, as even an adolescent Eren would make it clear to him that he still had a duty to fulfill. The conversation was over though. He knew words couldn't hold back curiosity. Now holding the keys to the journal that held the truth, he told Eren that when he returned, he would show him the basement secrets. At this point, genuinely believing that he would be able to do so, that this wouldn't be the very last time he would ever see his complete family. But interestingly, he was not looking at the younger Eren when he said this. He was face to face now with the older Eren from the future. In the actual first episode, we don't see Grisha's face here at all. All we have is an emphasis shot on the key, so whether Isayama somehow had this plan from the very beginning, or he simply revisited the first chapter of the story when constructing this one, it is a great touch all the same. Grisha's eyes were widened here, and Eren too had a look of seriousness. Again, up to this point, it was Zeke in focus, but here, Eren has stepped forward during the memory. Grisha would now return to the hideout of the Wall's King under the guise of a business trip. Upon arrival, Grisha would introduce himself while Eren and Zeke from the future would watch on behind him. From there, Grisha would plead to have the Titans attacking the Walls killed, explaining that his wife and children were in danger. Now, Frida has never been a bad person. In fact, it is quite the contrary, but as a royal in possession of the Founding Titan's power, her personal convictions were of little relevance, as despite appearing to be unsettled by such information, she conceded to the king's will, which then took control. Grisha's request would be denied, and it would then be considered Judgment Day for the subjects of Ymir. It would be explained that the power of the Titans mustn't fall into the people's hands. If the power of the founder were to fall into weak hands, the world would again become hell. And this is pretty ironic because it is like John said earlier about Eren bringing them all to hell. In the words of the king, they must accept their sins and welcome their ruin. And Zeke here would let it be known that he was on the very same page. Zeke was honestly pretty calm at this point and would also remind Eren that he mentioned seeing this memory through his father already and was disgusted by it, then asking if that was a lie too. Believing that if Eren was actually disgusted by this act, then he would truly be on his side. It was the act of killing this family after all that made Eren's own intentions possible. Now Eren was in fact disgusted by this moment, but not for the reasons that Zeke believed him to be. And as Zeke asked this question, he would be stunned. Eren had a scary expression as he watched on here, with Grisha now begging these indifferent tyrants to save his family from the Titans attacking the walls. Furthermore, expressing that in the eyes of the people within the walls, they are innocent because the memories of their ancestors' sins were wiped by the founder. Basically, they have been punished without even knowing what they did wrong. But this again would fall on deaf ears, as they would believe that the people should remain ignorant and be the only ones to die. This scene is wild because you get to see Grisha losing it while Eren in the background is furious just watching. This expression here is damn near demonic. This is up there with some of the strongest expressions in the whole series for sure. I mean, you can feel the boiling rage here. Even Grisha sensed a malicious force from behind him. Next would come the topic of the founder's powers. Grisha would quickly let it be known that he is aware that he won't be able to use his powers powers even if he stole it. Frida and Zeke's jaws would drop as Grisha explained that each Titan has its own unique trait, including the Attack Titan within him. As it so happens, the Attack Titan throughout time has not bowed to anyone because, in Grisha's own words, it's to fight the king's self-righteousness. As Eren walked past his side, Grisha would explain that they were led by their memories to this point. The big reveal would now come. The Attack Titan can glimpse into the memories of its future inheritors. In other words, it knows the future. This shot was perfect. We would see Zeke in the far back, Grisha in the middle, and Eren ahead representing the future. The founder and Zeke were both understandably confused here. Zeke would immediately ask Eren the meaning of all of this. Grisha knew the founder was unaware of this and also unable to use its powers due to being bound by the vow to renounce war. With a look of insanity, Grisha would explain that this is where he eats the founder and ends the royal bloodline. He'd pull out a blade and declare that his future is already decided. They would all start running as Grisha pulled out a scalpel ready to charge at them. However, he would see the kids here and hesitate, dropping his instrument. Like we pointed out with an earlier scene, Grisha is a doctor. He helps children and he saves lives. To commit such an atrocity would be to defy all that he stood for. Grisha would now drop on his hands and knees as Eren would loom over him in dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, the royal family, children and all, would beckon Frida to kill Grisha. And mind you, Frida's eyes are not those of the founders in this instance, they are her own as she struggles in taking the man's life. But as she did, Eren would interact. He'd question his father and tell him to stand up. He then dropped down himself, grabbing hold of his father's shoulder and questioning him if he forgot what he was here to do, with a blank expression on his face, much to Grisha's horror. He would remind Grisha of his sister, who had been eaten by dogs. At this point, Zeke was shocked on so many levels. Firstly, on account of this whole future stuff. Then the fact that Eren was interacting with the past. And lastly, he was the one pushing the very agenda Zeke found so horrifying. Eren at this point was the devil on the devil of devil's shoulder. He would then command his father to get revenge here, to keep moving forward even if he dies, even after death. That he is eternally bound to this path. Eren is a bad man. Understand that if the Attack Titan can see into the future and such, all those who came before, whether they know it or not, they serve their purpose in achieving this future, Eren's future. And the notion of the future being observed is something we caught a glimpse of with Eren Kruger as he mentioned Armin and Mikasa when they had yet to even be born. Eren would push and push and push until his father gave in, with madness overtaking him and he would shift. From which point we would receive a rendition of a defining moment from season 3 where Eren kisses Historia's hand. This was when Eren's involvement in all of this began. After the slaughter, Eren was expressionless as Zeke just looked over at him in utter disbelief and horror. Once the deed was done, Grisha would stumble out of his Titan body and give us such a magnificent series of movements. His madness being on full display here, all while calling out to Eren, questioning if this was what he wanted, if he was happy now, even specifying that he allowed Rod Race to survive here. Which just goes to show how much Eren has orchestrated. Now a broken shell of a man, Grisha would question why Eren wouldn't show him the full picture, as apparently Eren would not show him the fate of their family after the destruction of the walls. Grisha then knew his other son Zeke to be there as well, as Eren was nowhere to be seen. He is still present, but he is just not in the shot. Grisha would make it clear to Zeke that nothing would go his way from now on, that Eren will get what he wants because he saw Eren's memories of the future. He's seen the rumbling, and it is far worse than he could have ever imagined. And from there, he would genuinely see Zeke, amazed to see the growth of his first son, who he hadn't seen since he was a child. And the means to which he is able to see Zeke here is by way of Eren's memories of being with Zeke. It's a pretty trippy experience, but I will say that if Eren had a choice of what to show his father, showing him Zeke in this instance could perhaps be considered one final kindness to them both, or perhaps less kindly and more likely a means of shattering Zeke's foolish ideology and lifelong resolve, as Grisha so severely regretted his cruelty as he admitted his wrongs and apologized to his son. Zeke here had no words as Grisha without hesitation would grab hold of and hug his son, telling him that he loves him as he sobbed, regretting not spending more time with him. Zeke again was too stunned to speak. Eventually, however, he too would begin to cry, calling out to his father. But Grisha's final words to Zeke here would be, "Please stop Eren." As like the star of a horror film, Eren stood behind them both. We would then suddenly get a shot of Eren's reaction after kissing Historia's hand, furthermore solidifying the significance of that moment as Zeke was suddenly cast away and the connection between him and Eren was severed. Now on the ground, he would simply look to Eren, who was still bound, as Eren looked down on his older brother. And guys, this is now my favorite episode of Attack on Titan. This was phenomenal in every sense. This is the pinnacle of Attack on Titan greatness here, and this adaptation was all I could have asked for and more. But I want to ask you to support our brand new channel, Plot Armor Comics, where we aim to bring you Western comic content just like how we do over here with anime and manga. Every bit of the Plot Army support helps and is greatly appreciated. And if you haven't enlisted, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on, because when it comes to bringing you some of the best Attack on Titan content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I'm Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.